watching PowerNation. Hey y'all, today we're kicking off our new season with a famous Ford that's had a good run of bad luck.
That's right, we're gonna be plucking the heart out of this foobarred Ford, see if it's got any pep left in its step.
Then, we're gonna open the floodgates and tear into that transmission so that when the truck gets running, it'll actually get down the road. All that and more coming up on Music City Trucks.
Nothing cooler than an old pickup, am I right?
Underneath all this dirt, there's probably a pretty good truck.
You know, here on Music City Trucks, we've done a lot of really cool projects, but I don't think any of them are quite as cool as what we got behind this door.
That's right, behind door number 6 here is not only a piece of automotive history, but it truly encapsulates the name on our shirt. Get rolling. This hidden gem is a 1960 Ford F100. Nothing cooler than an old Ford pickup, am I right?
Nope.
This particular F100 belongs to legendary country music superstar Clint Black. And if you're a fan of Clint, you've definitely seen this old Ford before. Its timeless design features a classic rounded cab with subtle stylish lines, tying into that iconic grille.
Lots of both. Well,
Got enough lead in my pencil. I'd say that wasn't a pain in the butt.
a little more. With this truck sitting in storage for over 25 years, driving it onto the trailer wasn't an option. Man, the springs in this seat feel like the ones in that mattress at your grandma's house that every family member has slept in since the 80s. Oh man, that was a little harder than I thought it would be.
Definitely harder than it needed to be. You know the story on this old truck?
The story of this truck is it was found for me to use in my first music video, A Better Man. So I drove it in the video, I used it in the second video, Killing Time, and then I hit the road forever and ever and ever. You know, 20 years go by, I realized I need to do something with it.
So Clint had us haul his beloved 1964 pickup into the shop to see what we could do to get it up and running for his tour. It has an original inline 6 that doesn't look too shabby, but someone has definitely made some questionable engineering choices that we'll have to address. And according to Clint, this truck has had its own history of hangups.
The last time I drove it, normally out in the Houston Rodeo, I would ride in on horseback. And I thought after those 2 videos, I would drive the truck in instead. And I did. And I got halfway to the stage and it broke down. They managed to fix it. They told me it was the transmission. They fixed it with a coat hanger, just enough to get it off the field. I haven't driven it since. It's a fantastic piece of automotive history. You know, the work that Music City Trucks is going to do on it, you've got to see. You know, they love doing this stuff so much, and those guys having that same kind of passion, I just know it's going to be better than I imagined. You hear that, guys? Pressure's on.
Well, Clint, we appreciate you stopping into the shop. Here's your old 1960 Ford F100. How's it feel to look at it after all these years?
Fantastic to see it again. And the idea that I'm going to be able to drive it again is, I can't even tell you how that makes me feel.
Yeah, initial walk around the truck, it's definitely got some cosmetic damage and stuff like that. We got a flat tire on that side.
Look away from the dent.
Right, yeah. But it gives it character, right?
Yeah. If you don't see that dent, it looks almost new.
Why don't you come around the front here? We'll actually pop the hood.
Yeah.
These little hoods are heavy.
Yeah.
A little bit.
That's actually metal.
It's got a soda can for the air cleaner.
I don't remember that.
Did you put that there?
I did not put that there. I mean, you can just keep that Coke can, but chrome it out.
Chrome adds 10 horsepower. Did you know that?
That's right.
One of the things we love the most about these old trucks is you've got room to actually get in and fix it. So even with something like this that's been sitting for as long as it has, we've got room to actually work around and get it back on the road for you.
We want you to be able to get back into it and fire it up and just cruise it for when you did, 30 years ago.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah. Just look at the rest of the truck. Something that's been sitting this long, it's got old drum brakes, so it'd probably be best if we go through new shoes, new drums, just completely do the whole thing, because the safety is going to be the #1 priority on any kind of barn find or old truck or anything that's been sitting a while. So
I like that safety part.
Oh yeah, for sure. And probably some shocks. We'll go through the steering linkage,
By the time we get done with this, the end goal is for you to be able to hop in whenever you feel like it, wherever you feel like driving this thing.
Hard to imagine.
How long has it been since you sat behind that steering wheel?
It's been 30 years or more.
30 years.
Yeah.
Well, what do you say we get you back in this thing?
Yes, I'd like to sit in there. The door still opens.
Wonder if that coat hanger's still hanging out down there.
That'd be cool if it was.
Yeah, I want a picture of that.
Yeah, I bet you've got a lot of good memories sitting in that driver's seat, don't you?
Yep, I'm remembering now that it doesn't have a radio.
Yeah.
And then we'll get in and make sure all those gauges are working too. That way you don't have anything to worry about once you get it back on the road.
A law-abiding man like you doesn't need a working speedometer anyway, is that right?
No, I know what 90 looks like.
We know you're a busy man and you want to get going on your tour, but next time you see this thing, I think you're going to be pretty happy with it.
Next time you sit in that seat, you'll be driving it down the road.
Well, in the meantime, I'm leaving here a better man.
Never gets old. Up next, we stop killing time and pluck the heart from this old Ford. Woohoo! Well, guys, it's an honor and a privilege that Mr. Clint Black entrusted us to get his old 1960 Ford F100 back on the road. Now, during initial inspection, we went through everything, including the brakes, suspension, fuel, and cooling systems. However, we did run into one more serious issue that we did not anticipate.
Now, anytime you're dealing with a truck that's been sitting for a long time like this one, the biggest question is always going to be, will it run? Now, before you try and run it, there's a few things you got to check. Fluids, make sure all the parts are there, and make sure it actually turns over. And that is where we ran into our issue, because this should really be moving right now, especially with a breaker bar this big on it. So our first step is going to have to be to yank this out of here and see if it can even be rebuilt.
Man, it reminds me when I was working in a restoration shop, we actually did a 1960 Ford F100, and we actually ended up nicknaming that thing Murphy, after Murphy's Law. Whatever could go wrong, went wrong.
Oh, now that we got things moving, there's a hole in the radiator.
Wouldn't have it any other way.
I don't think a radiator hose is supposed to sound like that.
Ooh, smells good. That is a genuine FOMO-Co part right there, my friend. Now, this old Ford pickup is kind of an odd duck, and parts and hardware are a little hard to come by, so be sure when you're tackling a project like this, tag and bag everything. These old Ford trucks rust out in the weirdest spots, don't they?
Yeah, at least with Chevys, you know exactly where they're going to rust every single time.
Sometimes these little screws get pretty rusty. Shock them by giving them a couple taps like that. They break free. Well, so far, almost every nut, bolt, and screw has given us a little bit of fits. This thing's definitely rustier than we anticipated, but we're still making great progress. I got a couple more things to loosen up here in the front, while Eric tackles a few things in the back.
And the first thing we're going to be doing back here is getting this drive shaft disconnected from our rear axle. As you can see, this thing's been leaking for who knows how long. But in this case, it's probably actually going to help us a little bit because all that leakage is going to make sure that these didn't rust over and get seized up. Sounds like you're having a ton of fun up there.
Yeah, want to switch me?
I think I'm all right. All right. That looked like water.
It's not good.
Yeah, that's not supposed to be in there.
Yeah, that's not a good sign if there's that much moisture coming out of the tail shaft.
I'm gonna go grab a drain so we can pop that drain plug and see what the rest of it looks like.
Just out of our morbid curiosity, if nothing else.
I can smell it already. Let's see, that should be.
Rusty, watery, gross gear oil.
Oh, wait.
That is straight water right there.
That's bad.
Add that to the list.
All right, should be the last one. All right, you got it?
Yes, sir.
All right. Finally.
With everything out of the way, we're finally ready to pluck this thing out of here. Now, the reason why we went this route is because we are pulling the engine and transmission out as one unit. And to get all of that up and over that tall core support, well, that was gonna be a pain. This is gonna be much easier. Come on down.
All right,
Let's try it.
give it a shot. See what happens. That's gonna lean quite a bit. I think we should maybe get a chain or something we can run up just to support this side.
Yeah.
Now, probably gonna need a longer bolt here and a washer. Bolt through that bottom link. Right thread?
Yeah.
Beautiful. All right.
Woohoo!
There we go. It works. Ooh. A little bit drippy. Ooh, that's it's coming out of the dipstick too.
Water in the crankcase, I'm gonna say.
There we go. That'll do her. Oh boy. Well, you know what we got to do now? We got to crack this thing open and see what's going on.
Nothing else. Out of our morbid curiosity. I wonder if this thing was in a flood or something.
Coming up, we get our hands on something that's old, new, borrowed, and blue. So with everything we found inside that engine and all the water that came out of this transmission, it's pretty safe to say we're gonna have to bust this thing open and see what's going on in there. Now, this is based on these numbers here on the top. It is a Borg-Warner T85 that Ford used from 1953 to 1962. Now, it's not anything special. It's not gonna make your truck any faster, but it is a good, reliable transmission if you're not putting a lot of power to the rear wheels. Now, as you can see, our third and reverse linkage is still perfectly fine, but the first and second, it's not going anywhere. Now, our input shaft still spins good, so I think we'll be able to rebuild this, but the only way to find out is to get it torn apart. That's the first step. We gotta get this clutch shift fork popped out. That actually came out really easy. Now, something I thought was really interesting about this particular truck is that it had a factory equipped hydraulic clutch, which I've never seen in a truck this old. I think that's pretty cool. Slide that off there. While you're tearing these apart, be on the lookout for anything broken, showing any signs of excess wear, and definitely any rust, which if we're gonna find anything inside of this, it's probably gonna be rust. You do wanna try and be careful, make sure you don't break anything, and especially if you're dealing with something this old, you won't find replacements. I know this thing's been in storage for quite a while, but all this, all over the engine and the transmission, everything else, really makes you wonder what this truck did before Clint got it. And that right there is exactly what we expected to find. So let's get these guts pulled out and see just how bad it is. There we go. It's a good release. Whoa. Definitely not as bad as it could be. I think it's pretty safe to say that we could definitely rebuild this, but that's gonna require finding some parts, so I'm gonna go take a look.
Well, obviously, that old engine that we pulled out of Clint Black's 1964 F100 has kicked the bucket. And yeah, it technically could be saved with some serious machine work, but in the spirit of saving ourselves some time and some coin, we visited a friend up in Waverly, Tennessee, and he had this one sitting in his boneyard. Now, this particular model actually came out of a 63 or 64 F100, which they are pretty much the same except for the position of the thermostat, timing cover, and motor mounts, among a couple other things. But the most important part is that it does spin freely. However, it's a little bit ugly on the outside, so I'm gonna get to work tearing off all these accessories and we'll start prepping it for some paint. Now, the first thing I'm zipping off is this exhaust manifold, which is also the intake manifold. Now, when you're taking this off, you want to make sure that you keep all your bolts in order because they do have different sizes and lengths, and it does matter when you go put it back together. If I was exposed to this much heat and elements for the past 60 years, I'd be pretty crusty too. I'm gonna go ahead and mask all these off. So I'm gonna be flinging some debris here. I start using a wire wheel to clean all this gunk off. Better be safe than sorry, I guess. Knuckle buster, gotta love it. Now, usually these just have a thick gasket on them, but it's like somebody used some of this gasket sealant or gasket maker to use in place of the old school gasket because it's missing half of it. Oof, so the water pump's a little crusty. Hopefully we can get another one. Now, earlier I mentioned the motor mounts. On Clint's old truck, it has like 2 motor mounts that kind of sit on both sides and come down at a diagonal. But on these later model ones, the front motor mounts actually mount to like a front cross member. And actually, you guys remember that old flatbed that the Music City trucks built a little while back? That's kind of the same setup. But swapping these out, not that big a deal. At this point, I'm not necessarily trying to strip everything down underneath the paint. Just trying to get all this loose grime and grease off, just so we have a nice, smooth platform for when we go down to lay down some paint. Up next, we mask up for prime time, start feeling blue. Well, after a few hours of some elbow grease, we're just about ready to lay some color on our inline 6 here. But before we do that, we need to tape off all of our ports. And for you guys doing this at home, got a little masking trick for you. Now, most of these openings, they have these little sharp edges, and you can use those to your advantage. Basically, all you're gonna do is spread your masking tape all the way across. And as you set it down, you wanna push firmly as much as you can. And then here's where the trick comes in. Take your little rubber mallet, you're just gonna go gently all around those little sharp edges. And as I'm doing this, it's just nice little taps, not trying to necessarily kill it. What it does is gives you an imprint on your masking tape, and then that will provide a little bit of a roadmap to where you need to cut with your razor blade. Last step, we're gonna clean everything with wax and grease remover, and we're ready for some primer. Feel like I'm mixing this in a big old witch's cauldron. This black epoxy primer is ideal for our first coat because it's sturdy, neutralizes rust, and has a high heat threshold. The color we chose to lay down is Ford Corporate Blue, courtesy of our pals at POR 15. I know Clint is a big fan of black, but black and blue have been known to go together a time or two.
While Joel was getting our engine cleaned up and painted, I went ahead and took some of the smaller parts and got them refurbished. Things like brackets, manifolds, and some other little stuff.
Yeah, because some of this stuff is really hard to come by, so we've got a good mixture of old parts and new parts, but for everything we got on the table, I think it's gonna look pretty sweet on that old engine. Something oddly satisfying about this kind of work, isn't there?
Oh yeah, simple, easy. This thing's gonna look great when we get done.
One thing I do love about these old trucks, they are simple.
Yeah, I don't think it gets much more simple than a base model F100.
You know what's crazy about the Titanic?
What's that?
After all these years, the swimming pool is still full of water. Fun fact. R.I.P. soda can.
Today, we made a lot of progress. It's a little tight, but we're good. We found an old Ford F100 that was lost in yesterday, so we swapped out a few parts to put an end to its sorrow. Rust sickles. Oh my God.
Yeah, we turned the page on its flooded out, locked up motor.
Oh, wow.
And instead of chasing our blues away, we painted it Ford's corporate color to get Clint Black one step closer to taking home the truck he's known.
Now, don't think we forgot about this old boat anchor that actually came out of the truck.
Oh.
Whew. We did some pretty shocking stuff to get it freed up that you can check out on our website.
That's not a chocolate milkshake.
But for now, we'll see you truckers next time.
We've got Clint Black's 1964 F100 back in the shop, and we're tearing it apart from stem to stern. We replaced the entire suspension system.
And if you're into old trucks with rust, crust, and stubborn nuts, stick around. Sorry.
Nothing cooler than an old pickup, am I right?
Underneath all this dirt, there's probably a pretty good truck.
Welcome to Music City Trucks. Today, we're going down under.
That's right, we got Clint Black's 1964 F100 up in the air to address a bunch of suspension and steering components issues, along with brakes, wheels, and tires to ensure that this thing's first trip back on the road is not its last.
And the first step to doing all that is going to be to get all these old parts out of the way. We found this Fubard F100 right in the heart of Music City, USA, and she was in desperate need of attention. Look, we need to give this thing a deep creek bath the second we roll it in. Ugh.
Turns out she had taken a pretty serious bath already. That is straight water right there.
That's bad. All right, probably start bringing it forward. Ooh. Oh my God.
So, with all the water damage we found, we had to go to plan B and snag another 223 inline six that we painted Ford blue.
Now we're on to tearing out all the old junk from this truck, and hopefully we won't be shocked with any more surprises. There's plenty of obvious problems here in the rear of this truck, but there's a couple of things that are jumping out to me a little bit more than the rest, and that is these shocks right here, because I should not be able to do that. Now, these studs right here are supposed to be welded onto these brackets so that the shocks mount to the axle. Now, I don't know if somebody fixed it at some point and the repair failed, or if they broke and never got fixed, but that is not right. Whew. Easy. You can hit the end of your U-bolts, but I try to avoid it just to keep from damaging threads.
But if the U-bolts are rusted out, they can be a safety hazard. So you might need to play a game of good old whack-a-jole.
Yep, down, down, down.
Wait a minute, if you're here and I'm here, who's running the lift?
Jinkies. Well, I know we're replacing pretty much everything on the suspension, but if there's one thing we can reuse, I think it's gonna be this rear axle.
Yeah, it's actually not in too bad a shape. It's not rusted through, but it's got a lot of nasty creek bed water almost looks like.
It's got plenty of grime on there that definitely needs to come off. So I think we'll soak it down in some degreaser and give it a quick pressure wash. That'll take care of it.
Yeah, fresh coat of paint afterwards too.
Oh yeah.
Cool. All right, buddy, do you need a hand with this?
No, I got it. It's a little cold out here, so it should be quick.
Exactly why I'm going inside. Good luck.
With how crusty this rear axle is, it's kind of hard to tell how much degreaser we're gonna need. But as long as you make sure to cover every crack and crevice, hitting it with some high pressure H2O should have you good to go. Now, if you don't have access to a pressure washer, you can just use a simple scrub brush and a regular garden hose, but it's gonna take a little bit more time and elbow grease on your part. You don't have the luxury of owning a forklift, just leave it on the wheels and tires, roll it outside, and stick it up on some jack stands. Well, I can only feel 2 of my fingers, so I'm gonna give wintertime pressure washing a 2 out of 10. Let's get this inside.
Coming up, we rip apart our rear axle and give Clint Black a rundown. Well, after a quick pressure wash, we got the rear axle out of Clint Black's 1964 F100 looking a whole lot better. Yeah, she's still a little crusty around the edges, but nothing a wire wheel can't fix. Now, when it comes to aftermarket solutions on these old trucks, you could actually get an independent front suspension, disc brake conversion, 4-link. Heck, you could even get a brand new 9-inch rear axle if you wanted to. However, we received explicit instructions from Clint that he wants this thing to run and drive just like it did 30 years ago so that he can reminisce on old memories. First step in that process, get all this old junk off of here. Eric, cut off wheel.
I don't know what these U-bolts are doing on this axle, but we definitely don't need them.
Ooh, jeez Louise.
I really hope your side's not as bad as mine.
I know mine can't be any worse. Fixed it.
Get this yoke off of here. Is that a hair? Who's putting a hair inside the diff?
Bring the waiter over, tell him to take it back. Hey, Clint.
Hey, Joel, how you doing?
I'm doing good, sir. How are you? You're looking well.
Well, I'm feeling pretty well. I'm excited to see what you've been doing.
Yeah, well, let me show you some of the carnage real quick, and we'll give you a quick update here. This is your rear axle right here.
So that's not my new barbecue pit.
No,
Okay.
you could use it as one, but we like to get it back into your truck. The worst of it was on the outside. There's a bunch of corrosion. That's pretty standard on a 60-year-old truck. We're gonna go ahead and rebuild everything. So your rear axle is gonna look brand spanking new before it goes back into the truck.
So no fresh rust for me, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we can keep it on there if you want to keep that patina look, but I think you'll like a nice, fresh black paint job on it.
Yeah, it's not that kind of antique, I don't think.
Yeah. I'll bring you over here to your suspension now. So these are your front and rear leaf springs, and of course your shocks. Par for the course for a 60-year-old truck. I want to show you this shock real quick though. You see how badly bent up and dented that thing is?
That's not your normal wear and tear, right? Is it?
No, almost looks like something bounced up into your undercarriage.
No, I don't think that was me who did that.
But not to worry. For right now, I'm gonna toss you over to Eric, and he's gonna show you what else we got going on with your truck.
Hey there.
Hey, Clint, how's it going?
How you doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. We're here underneath of it, so I'm gonna show you around a little bit. Now, as you can see, it is mostly gone. There's almost nothing left under here. So underneath that plywood, that's daylight coming through your bed floor there. And that actually looks like it might be the original wood that was in this bed. The frame itself, very crusty. There's no rust holes in it though. For the most part, it's actually still good solid metal. So what we're gonna do there is strip all of that and get it recoated. Then we come to this big old hole right here, and that is where your engine should be. When the truck first came in, we tried to get it to turn over, but that old engine would not budge. We pulled the engine and the transmission out, and both of them were full of water. And you know anything about that?
Well, there have been some floods in Houston. Could have been one of those.
Well, we got it all tore apart, and it's not pretty. As you can see, we've got just the bare engine block here. We've got no pistons left in it. It looks halfway decent, but there was no way we were gonna get this thing ready by the time you needed the truck for the tour. So we went ahead and we found a replacement for it that we think might serve you a little bit better.
So this is a 223 inline six that came out of another 63 Ford F100, and it was pretty much complete and it turned over and everything. So we pulled all the accessories off of it. You've got a brand new carburetor. We went through and rebuilt the manifold, gave it a nice fresh Ford corporate blue paint job, new distributor, new ignition wiring. You just got a little bit of everything in here. So
We couldn't stick with the Coca-Cola air filter. Is that what I'm seeing there?
But yeah, we think this will serve you a little bit better than that old boat anchor sitting on the
Yeah.
crane over there.
Man, that's a beautiful thing right there. Yeah, the bad news turned out to be pretty good news.
yeah, it turned out to not be that big a deal anyway. We found you a new engine. We were able to clean this one up, and I think it's gonna look pretty sharp underneath the hood of your old truck up there.
Yeah, I mean, it looks good just sitting where it is.
But next time you see this truck, you'll actually be able to get in and drive it.
My face hurts from smiling. This is fantastic.
It's probably gonna feel good to sit behind that driver's seat after all these years.
I'm excited. Thanks for the tour.
Yeah, no problem.
Absolutely.
Back to work.
Back to the truck that keeps on giving.
Up next, we get our bearings and differentiate our refurbed rear back into gear.
After some sweat from our brow and a few coats of paint, the rear axle assembly on our old Ford has definitely received quite a facelift. Now this particular housing is actually a first gen of the coveted Ford 9-inch, which is one of the most popular and sought after assemblies on the market today. This rear axle has been a pillar of the hot rodding and off-roading communities since their introduction in 1957. They have a strong ring and pinion configuration, durable bearings, stout bolt-in axles, and their future growth potential is simply unparalleled. You could easily build one of these to handle up to 1,000 horsepower plus. Another favorable perk of the Ford 9-inch is their dropout bolt-in third member assembly, and it makes it super easy to swap out your gear ratios there at the track. You got a lot of options there as well, ranging from a 3-to-1 to 5-to-1, and a gear set for every ratio change, and that is what we're going to tear into next. Upon initial inspection of our ring gear, we found that it wasn't in too bad a shape other than some corrosion on a few of the teeth. Now you could technically run this, but this is one of those things where we might as well go ahead and swap it out while we're in this deep. Also, take a listen to these bearings. And them bad boys are about shot. Luckily, swapping all this stuff out ain't gonna be that big of a deal. First thing I like to do is mark these little adjusters just so I have a good starting point for when I go put it back together. And another thing you're gonna wanna do is mark your main caps because it does matter which side and which direction they go. Now they make these little specialty sockets for these adjusters, but if you don't have one of those, what you can do is take a hammer and a little punch and just get it started, and then you can take like a set of snap ring pliers and spin them from there. So this is just a little specialty tool that you can use to pop off your bearings. Just kind of seats right underneath the bearing. So you just want it just snug enough to where it's gonna butt up against it, and then you can push and press right through the shaft and it'll pop the bearing off. Up to the press we go. All right, got our old bearings popped off and the new ones pressed on. And I also went ahead and pulled off our old ring gear, so now we're ready to put the new one on. So your rebuild kits are usually gonna come with a little tube of thread locker. And this is for your bolts from your ring gear to your carrier. So this next step is kind of a slow and tedious process, but it's really important that you take your time here because you want to use the bolts to reseat your ring gear. Let's go nice and easy in a star pattern until it's fully seated, and we'll torque our bolts down. Torque spec on these is 110 foot-pounds, but we'll start out at 90 and work our way up. Well, we got our third member completely reassembled with a brand new ring gear as well as new bearings. Take a listen to this. Much better, right? Now, I also went through and completely rebuilt our pinion support with, again, all new bearings, new races, a new O-ring seal, as well as new yoke seal. Now, the next thing to do is to measure rotational drag, meaning the amount of drag between your yoke and your pinion using an inch-pound torque wrench. Now on the inside of this pinion support is what is called a crush sleeve, and it sits between both bearings. And the more you press your pinion into your yoke, the more it expands, creating more drag. Now you want about 18 to 26 inch-pounds of rotational drag, and we are about 22 to 24 right there. You want to check it both ways. Yep, 18. Looks like 22 to 24 going the other way. Now before we bolt in our pinion support, we have to install one or possibly more of these depth shims. You have to put them in between the pinion support and your case. Now these dictate the distance between your pinion and your ring gear, and it's super important to have your gear pattern correct, otherwise you could start breaking off or loosening up the teeth. Now the best way to measure which one you need is to take your original one, if you still have it, and measure its thickness. So the original one was 0.012, this one's 0.013, let's just start there. So both the shim and the pinion support only go on one way on these 9 inches. Make sure you got everything lined up. Now this is a new O-ring, so some light tapping may be required. Oh, we got it seated deep enough to where we can get a bolt in. So just like we did on the ring gear, we use the bolts, completely cinch it down. We will cinch this all the way down until it's fully seated and torque them down from there. With our third member and pinion support assembly finally back together, it's time to measure our backlash. Now what is backlash? Well, it's the amount of play between your ring gear and your pinion. Let's see where we're at. Now when you're checking this, you want your dial gauge sitting right on top of the drive side of your ring gear, or the sharp side. So we're zeroed right now. We'll check our play. Right now we're at about 13 thousandths, so we need to tighten it up just a little bit. Now also usually included with your rebuild kit is a little tube of yellow or sometimes white paint. What you do is you paint it on your ring gear and then you make a few revolutions on your pinion and see where you're making contact. All right, from the looks of it, we are making contact right in the middle of the ring gear, which is what you want. Now, if you ever have any kind of contact on the inside edge or the toe of your ring gear, that means you need to add shims because you're too deep. But if the contact pattern is towards the outer edge, which is the heel, that means you need to take shims out because you're too shallow. But from where we're at, everything's looking good, so we'll go ahead and torque down our main caps and install our retainers. Put this thing back in there. Good thing I don't make these heavy. Watch your fingers. Well, now all that's left to do is for me and Eric to put this rear axle back together, and we're ready to put on some brakes. Don't worry, we're painting the differential.
I think it looks good.
Patina, baby. Coming up, we brake on through and spruce up our wheels one piece at a time.
While Joel was getting our rear axle taken care of, I was busy getting all of our front axle components refinished. Clint wants this truck to perform just like he remembers, so we're reusing OE components. Now our first step here with everything already painted is going to be to replace our grease fittings with new ones. Now, I left these old fittings in because I knew we were going to be replacing them. The paint here makes it a little bit of a tighter fit, but that's actually going to help us because this will hold it in place better before it's bolted in. The axle is upside down right now, so we want to make sure that these are oriented correctly. See? Soft mallet. All right, so next we're going to be getting our brackets put on for our steering components, but I got a little bit of paint on these bolts, so it's probably going to be a little stiff to put them in. Easy way would be to use one of these little soft mallets and tap them in so you don't damage the finish, but what if you don't have one? Well, say you've got a regular hammer and some tape and a rag, you can make a soft hammer. What I like to do, if I ever need to, take the rag and just double it over as many times as you can, then wrap it around the head of your hammer, take some tape, whatever tape you have on hand will work, because all it has to do is hold that rag on there. And as long as the tape reaches itself, it'll hold that on there just fine. Got our bolts loose. We'll take our freshly manufactured soft hammer. Because we're using OE parts, we decided to hop on the AutoZone Pro website, and they had just about everything we needed to get this job done right. Duralast products are designed to meet or exceed OE specifications. In our case, for the job we're doing right now, we've got their wheel bearings and seals, wheel cylinders, drums and shoes, tie rod ends, and all new brake hoses. And that's gonna cover all of our bases to get this truck back on the road driving just like Clint wants it. And we're gonna get started with the bearings and seals. Now, when you're doing something like this, using OE components and going for any type of restoration, whether it's just getting something back on the road or doing a full-on restoration where it's gonna be pristine, it's always nice to find parts that are stamped with the manufacturer's label. But in this case, these wheel seals having that stamp means they've probably never been changed, and that's definitely not the place you wanna see them. Look at that. That grease is probably twice my age. Whew. Oh yeah. With our new races pressed in, it's time to put in the new Duralast wheel bearings and seals. Now, installing new seals is pretty easy as long as you're careful about it. I like to use a block of wood to hit the entire surface at the same time to make sure it's going in evenly. Now, you're just looking for it to be flush all the way across. To get these hubs put on, that means we got to put in the outer bearing, and there's no way to do that with tools, so I'm actually going to put gloves on because I hate getting grease all over my hands. Clean up all the excess. With the new bearings in and the hubs back on the spindles, it's time to seat the bearings and get the caps put on. You want to spin your hub while tightening the nut, and it'll get a little bit stiff. Then you just want to back it off enough to where you can get your cotter pin installed and have this spinning nice and free. Smash this down the rest of the way. Beautiful. Now we'll get the other side done, and it's time to put the brakes on.
Today, we got a lot closer towards getting Clint Black's old F100 back out on the road. I feel like one of those ice sculpture guys. We refurbished our classic Ford 9-inch rear axle, stripping off all the grit and grime left behind by Father Time. Then, we hit it with a few coats of paint, along with a fresh rebuild to get this thing looking brand spanking new. Next, we ditched the torn tires and spruced up the original wheels with a quick stop off at the beach before hitting them with some black paint. Now, all that's left is the rest of the truck. With that front axle completely rebuilt, this old truck's gonna ride and stop just like a dream. Now obviously, we still got a whole lot of work to do, but with big ticket items like that Ford 9-inch completely done, man, we're well on our way. Until then, see you truckers next time.